Sorry, okay, this is not who I thought it was. This is Brian. He's on Mardu something. I don't know what he is, burn or control or exactly what he is, but Josh, start things. Oh, Josh isn't on Jund either. He's on Death's on Living End. Interesting. All right, he's on Living End instead, so we're gonna see him cycle away a Street Wraith here at the end of turn. He'll fall to 16. Now Brian has played Living End before, so he will be familiar with what's going on. Um, It'll just be interesting to see whether or not his deck is built to beat this. All right, so Josh here cycling on his main phase. Bloodstained Mire is the play for the turn. Brian here has a Foreboding Ruins. On end turn, he's going to go ahead and fire off a Lightning Bolt at Josh. So Josh will fall to 13 here. I have already seen in Josh's hand there is a copy of Violent Outburst. So at the moment, he does have access to 3 creatures in his graveyard. We're going to go ahead and fetch away this Bloodstained Mire on the end step. Do we have another Cycler? I don't think we do. I think we just have a couple Violent Outbursts in hand. So yeah, he's going to bring that one into play tapped because he has nothing to do with the mana just yet. So it'll be interesting to see if he fires off the Outburst here. He doesn't have any other creatures that he can cycle at the moment, so he's not going to get any extra value out of waiting. Unless he wants to wait, at least 2 turns, which seems a little bit long. We could also just see him potentially go for the Outburst on Brian's end step, since Outburst is the instant speed one that he does get access to. But he is going to start his turn here by sacrificing this Bloodstained Mire in his main phase, so this may just be him going for the Violent Outburst now. He already has the green mana with Stomping Ground. He also has a copy of Living End in his hand, which is not where you want it. You don't ever want to draw that card. Nope, he is just going to pass the turn back. So we are going to see an end step Outburst is my guess. Brian with just a Mountain, and sure enough, here is the Violent Outburst. So we're going to cascade ourselves into a copy of Living End. We'll pull it up here. In case you're not familiar with the card itself, Living End is no mana. It's a Living End is black. So spend 3 for 4 mana. Each player removes all creature cards in his or her graveyard from the game, then sacrifices all creatures in play. All creatures he or she controls, then puts into play all cards they exiled. So basically, put your creatures in your graveyard into your exile, put your creatures in play into the graveyard, put your exile into play. Kind of shift things around a little bit. So he does get back here a Monster Scarabid, a Street Wraith, and an Architects of Will. There is an Architects of Will trigger here he gets to use. So he's going to look at the top 3 cards of Brian's library, and he gets to rearrange them however he'd like. So I believe he went Land, Boros Charm, Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, which is interesting. Brian here thinking on his end step. I really think that Brian wins this race. He doesn't know it, but he did win. He would have won this race if he had just Helix Josh. Brian would get to go on your end step. Brian would take what? I think it takes like 8, 9, 10, 11, something like that. All right, so here is the attack. Again, I believe Carapid's a 4 power, and then Street it's 3, so that should be 7. I believe Brian's at 16 here. Brian having a look. He's got a Fatal Push in hand, but that's just no use to him. He does have a copy of Monastery Mentor, so he's on Mardu Mentor, I guess we can call his deck, which is different. Okay, there's a Blood Crypt. He's got a Never to Return in his hand, which is going to be pretty good here. Now, I mean, we know that Josh has that second copy of Violent Outburst, so as long as he doesn't draw his Living End, he will be able to get back anything Brian kills. Josh, however, still hasn't drawn any extra cycling creatures, which is a little bit rough for him. His deck consists mainly of cycling creatures, so it's a little bit awkward when you don't hit them. But that is variance. So back to Brian we go after simply attacking for 3 and playing our land. So there is that Boros Charm. So again, had Brian just fired off Helix at Josh's face, he would have won this turn. Now, I believe he would have won the race, right? Because Architects is 3 power, I think. It was 2. It was 3, so that's what? That's 10 damage, and Brian would have been at 23, so I would have taken 3 attacks. So, yeah, Brian would have won this race had he just stuck to a burn game plan. Again, it's hard to know that, especially when you're staring down, 3 big creatures and your opponent just stacked your deck 3 cards. So you can't fault Brian for the line he took here, just stay safe. But Brian, main phase, went ahead and fetched up a basic swamp. He does have a mentor in hand, and he also has a Boros Charm to... Well, he can't play both. He only has 1 white source. A little bit awkward. I'm curious. He's playing things like Concealed Courtyard and Foreboding Ruins. I'm curious if he, it's more a budget-friendly deck in the sense that he doesn't have his shock lands. Things like his Blood Crypts and that kind of stuff, or Godless Shrines. They could also just be elsewhere in other decks. So here comes an attack for 3. Brian does have a swamp, so that is unblockable. I think Josh picked up another copy of Architects of Will. So there's a copy of Lingering Souls. Brian did shuffle away the Gideon. He didn't know it was there, obviously, but that was the 3rd card that Josh got to see with his Architects of Will. Here's going to be a Boros Charm, so Josh will fall to 7. Brian will get a Monk token. And he's a burn spell away from winning. Josh did see one of these Boros Charms, so he might believe that is the last one. Oh, actually, if this attack lands, isn't he just dead? It is a 3/3 right now. We're going to cycle this Architects of Will. Does he Violent Outburst this? He does. Okay. Interesting. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to find another copy of Living End. Usually the deck plays 3. We know he has 1 in hand. He's already used 1, so presumably we have 1 left on the deck. Otherwise, he's just doing this for show. There it is. So that typically is the final copy. The 1 in hand, not as good. It takes 3 turns to get there, so it's not really exciting. Josh will lose his Street Wraith, but he will end up with looks to be a lethal attacker or a lethal board state. I don't think Brian can... No, he can't Fatal Push anything here. And, I mean, it really wouldn't matter about Boros Charm, so... we look at 3 cards here. Never to Return Among Them, which would be nice, but... I guess Brian has Lingering Souls, but it doesn't matter. He can't cast it. He's short. Again, he's short that extra white mana, so... Brian is going to die on the attack here from Josh. But put up quite the fight. I guess he could have Fatal Pushed one of the Architects on Josh's turn because he did lose his Monastery Mentor and his token, so he would have had Revolt triggered. So he could have pushed away one of the Architects. That would have kept him alive at 2. So that was his line in this case. I did miss that, but off to game 2 we go. Josh looking over a couple cards in his sideboard. He's not looking at Brindleboar or Ingot Chewer, not surprising, but Ingot Chewer. I think he might have just grabbed Rough and Tumble. which is a pyroclasm effect on one side, and the other side it hits flyers. I think it's like a 6 damage to all flyers in there, half of it, so. Also brought in Shriekmaw, it looks like, not a bad one. The Evoke Doomblade creature. Probably what Evoke Terror probably is more accurate. Yeah, it's terror. Non-artifact, non-black. I think he's also bringing in Fulminator Mage. Okay. Brian, I don't really have a great look. Grafdigger's Cage is not going to be good, unfortunately. Grafdigger's Cage doesn't stop Living End. It actually does nothing against Living End, which is a little unfortunate. Living End brings the creatures into play from exile, so Cage does actual nothing against the deck. Rest in Peace is great. Fantastic card against Living End. They have quite a hard time beating it. But a Grafdigger's Cage they just look at and don't care about. All right. So shuffling up here for game 2. Brian's going to have the play. I don't know the composition of Brian's list. If he's more like a burn type deck, I don't put him far behind here. Burn can have a pretty decent matchup against this kind of deck if it just has the right curve out. Like, you don't necessarily need creatures. Only creatures look like they were token makers anyways. Things like Mardu, or not Mardu, like Monastery Mentor and Young Pyromancer. So, not really essential on their own, but Fumigate. Wow, he's playing a big board wipe. Brian on 6. So is Josh, I believe. Brian looked at a copy of Lightning Heel's top of the deck. His hand is, I believe, 3 Lingering Souls and a Fumigate, along with Arid Mesa and Blood Crypt. If that is the case, it's a little rough, but... Okay, so there's a turn 1 Arid Mesa facing off against turn 1 Bloodstained Mire. And then we're back to Brian here. So Brian, I believe, shipped his card to the bottom. No, maybe not. No, he didn't actually. He did he drew the Lightning Helix apparently. Okay. He's fetching, from what I can see on his main phase, into play tapped. He's not going to use the mana. Yeah, he did in fact keep the Lightning Helix. I'm a little curious. I guess it doesn't really matter. I mean, you know that Josh isn't going to play anything on turn 2. His deck just doesn't have 2-drops in it. Has no 1s and no 2s. All right, so Josh on the end step is going to fetch up an untapped Blood Crypt. Tells me he's going to have something to cycle here, obviously. What are we cycling? A desert Ceradon, it looks like. Yes, it is. So away goes the Ceradon. Josh pick up a card. Gonna move to his untap step here. All right, there is a Blooming Marsh, and here's a Simian Spirit Guide. Are we just... Okay, Fulminator Mage. Yeesh, that's rough for Brian. He's going to lock into this on just his mana base here, unfortunately. Fulminator Mage will blow up the Sacred Foundry. And we're back to Brian. So down to one land. He needs to find a one off the top here. He did not. He found Inquisition, which is okay, because if Josh only has one Cascade spell in hand, he'll get to take it away here. Josh is going to respond by discarding his Fairy Macabre, which allows him to exile 2 cards from a single graveyard. He'll just exile 2 lands out of Brian's graveyard here. The remainder of his hand here is 2 lands and a Shriekmaw, though, so doesn't really have anything to do, and he just picked up a copy of Living End, which, I mean, next turn it's fine because he can just suspend it, but it's, again, that's the slow way to get there, so... Brian's picked up a copy of Boros Charm, so he'll have nothing to do this turn. Josh will take his turn. Okay, there is that Bloodstained Mire, but he's not going to go ahead. He is playing some number of Kari Zev's Expertise, so he does have a way to technically cast Living End from his hand. It's not dead. The Expertise cycle made it a little bit, better when you get one in your hand. It's not good, obviously, to have one in your hand still, but it's not totally dead either, which is a bonus, at least. Josh is going to fetch up a basic Swamp here, down to 16. And we're going to cycle a Street Wraith down to 14. Looking for something with Cascade. Another Street Wraith, down to 12. Brian's got a Bolt at the ready. Right now he has 10 points of burden in his hand, but Josh just found Violent Outburst, so that's a pretty good one. Violent Outburst is going to return a whole bunch of things here, including that Fulminator Mage, which is going to let him blow up Brian's last land. And that's probably going to be enough for this game. There is the Living End. Shuffle everything back in, put it on the bottom. Okay. So cast Living End, get back 2 Street Wraiths, a Fairy Macabre, a Fulminator Mage, a Desert Ceradon. This, I believe, is on Josh's turn still. This might be on Brian's turn, so he might just be saying, I have you dead. 3, 6, 10. Well, it's not lethal. I think he only has 15 or 16 at most. Violent Outburst doesn't give them haste, so it's not like... that was also on Brian's turn still, so... but yeah, this is going to be game here. So 3, 6, I believe that's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I think Brian's going to go to 4. He's going to try and bolt down something. Fairy Macabre, sure. Fairy Macabre will die. So, 11, 13. So Brian goes to 6 here. And then we're going to Fulminator Mage away your last land. Yeah, that's going to be game. Nothing Brian can top to get out of that situation. He drew a Path to Exile, which would have been good, but not there. It's not. So, congrats.